Hello! Haven't done one of these in a while. Hope you guys have been enjoying the more frequent uploads. I sure am not. I gotta record a lot more videos. Just kidding. This is the fun part for me. That and responding to comments, which I mostly do, because Laura doesn't know shit. So here we are. She's just nodding in agreement. Like, no hard feelings, just genuinely like, yeah. Today we're talking about spells, spell spotlight, except again, we're not just doing one old spell, we're doing a bunch. We are doing the necrotic spells quite specifically. Luckily this is easy for me to research because all of the necrotic spells basically, as far as I know, are all necromancy. And necromancy is a very specific type of magic that when most people mention it you think, undead raising from, you know, but it also means returning someone to life, like totally legit, you know, bringing them back. And it's also like, you can also deal a buttload of necrotic damage with some of them, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to try and go through these relatively quickly because there's a lot of them, and most of them can kind of be attributed to being similar, but just better versions, if you know what I mean. For instance, there's Chill Touch and then there's Finger of Death, and they're two very different things. Let's talk about Chill Touch, shall we? The first on our necromancy damage list. It's pretty simple in concept. The damage isn't insane. It's a ranged spell attack. You get a d8 of necrotic damage and it has the regular cantrip scaling, so late game it'll become 4d8. Pretty good. Sorcerer, Warlock or Wizard can take this, and also a Death Cleric can, which a Death Cleric fucking should. They get extra abilities where they can make things that are resistant to it not resistant, and they can double up the cantrip and hit two people if they're next to each other. Chill Touch's main, you know, thing is that if you hit someone with it, they can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn, not theirs, yours. And if you hit an undead target with it, which more likely than not as you get into the late game they're probably going to be resistant to or immune to the damage, doesn't matter, because then they'll get a disadvantage on attack rolls against you until the end of your next turn. It's a pretty easy, free, you know, fuck you, you can't hit me anymore. Maybe they still can, but they gotta roll real fucking good. The other one is Toll the Dead, which is Chill Touch, but it's a wisdom save. It still does the regular d8, nothing else special with that. It scales up to eventually 4d8. However, if the target is missing any of their hit points, which more likely than not they will be, they're gonna be instead taking a d12, which upgrades all the way to 4d12. It's pretty sick, and generally a lot of things have good wisdom saves, which is upsetting, but you know, decent. We have a lovely little spell called Inflict Wounds that when people start playing clerics they realize they should take, because holy shit, it is good. It is real good. Melee spell attack, so that means you need to be in melee, but you know, the cleric that is going to be casting it, which is the only class that can, unless you're an Oathbreaker Paladin, means that you're gonna... Typically clerics are like kind of designed, they have a lot of good proficiencies with armor and weapons and shields and the like, so they can be in melee. So you might be in melee some of the time, which means with Inflict Wounds you can do that. And on a hit you're dealing 3d10 necrotic damage, and this is a first level spell. If you upcast it, it gets better. It's pretty cool. Ray of Sickness is a very good spell that goes underestimated. You do a ranged spell attack, and if it hits, the target takes an average of 9 poison damage, 2d8. The damage is scaled up with leveling. But they also need to make a Constitution saving throw, or they're poisoned until the end of your next turn. It's pretty good for a first level spell, to be fair, especially when you have a big bad guy that's about to go or something, and you're like, no, I'm gonna use a very low level spell on this, and hopefully it works. Ray of Sickness can be used by a lot of different things. Death Domain, Clerics, Sorcerers, the Undying Warlock, Wizards, and Alchemists, Artificers. A lot of stuff. It doesn't always have to be a necrotic based thing, but a new spell that was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that I really fucking jam with is Spirit Shroud, 3rd level necromancy, where you, as a bonus action, when you're basically melee attacking or like up to 10 feet from you, so you can also be like using reach weapons with this, you can be whipping people or glaving them. You deal an additional d8 of damage that can either be radiant, necrotic, or cold. I think the thematics of this, especially being able to be taken by a cleric, paladin, warlock and wizard, is a little less, you know, a little more situational for their sort of builds. But very, very good spell to consistently deal a lot more damage. Even having just one extra d8 in there is great. This thing has spiritual weapon scaling, which means that like if you upcast it to 4th, nothing changes, but then if you upcast it to 5th, that increases the damage by an extra d8, because otherwise that's a bit broken. This is probably one of the best spells ever I would recommend taking for a paladin. The flavor of just walking around and being like a paragon of death. This is like Hunter's Mark, but better. It's sick. It's sick to me. There is also Vampiric Touch, which is another spell that goes underestimated, but then you realize, holy shit, this is making my cleric a better melee guy than the fighter. So you cast it, and then once you've cast it, and as you cast it, you get to make a melee spell attack. It deals 3d6 necrotic damage, not anything extraordinary. However, it is concentration for up to a minute, so you can keep doing that as your action every single turn. And you also regain half the damage that you dealt. That's very cool. And the damage also increases by d6 for every spell slot. So upcasting a Vampiric Touch and managing to keep that up for a while, you will be kept up for a while. There's a lovely spell called Blight that is pretty much just a damage spam. It has some other little uses, but you're mainly using it for the 8d8 fucking necrotic damage that it does in an action. Target is a constitution save for half. It has no effect on undead and constructs because they're not living. Apparently if you target a plant, it makes it with disadvantage and the spell deals maximum damage. Little detail, when you have Blight, you're probably not going to be messing around with little twig blights, but if you see like a tree blight that you're fighting, you can just cast that on them and they just basically die. You can spend a 4th level spell to wither a big ass tree as well. Just for the sheer flavor, I think it's pretty cool. Various cleric domains get this, as well as druids, oathbreaker paladins, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and alchemist artificers, and that's a lot. But I guess Blight is kind of like one of the, you know, like just a fireball spell where most things probably have it. There's also Shadow of Moil. Okay, so you get resistant to radiant damage for a minute once you cast it as an action. This has a material component cost of like 150 gold, so make sure you've got that. And also, whenever a creature within 10 foot hits you with an attack, you get to lash back at him and deal 2d8 necrotic damage. Pretty neat. There's also other little details, like you become heavily obscured and you turn all of like the lights down in a 10-foot range around you. And only warlocks can get it, and there's no other class that is available to get it. I think for any sort of warlock, Shadow of Moil is pretty sick. Definitely vibing with it with the Hexblade, and also just any other sort of warlock. Innovation. This one's fun. A target of this spell needs to succeed a dexterity saving throw. If they succeed, they take half of 48 and their spell just stops. It's not that good. But if they fail, they take 48 necrotic damage, and until the spell ends, which you can concentrate on for up to a minute, you can deal another 48 to that same target. And if you deal damage with it, you regain hit points equal to half the amount of the necrotic damage. It's Vampiric Touch, but slightly better. You got a big bad guy that has a bunch of health and you're not looking so good on it, use Innovation, and now you're alive forever. You're going to be averaging healing about 10 hit points a turn with this, and it can go up by a d8 for every spell slot that you use. So definitely recommend pulling this on a big guy. Don't do this on like Bandit number 27. They'll die, and then you'll be like, oh, okay. Finally, for the 5th levels, we have Negative Energy Flood, which is kind of shit. It's a 5th level necromancy where you make something take a constitution saving throw. They take 5d12 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. A target killed by this damage, not knocked unconscious, killed, which is a different thing. They rise up as a zombie. I think that's a pretty cool thematic thing for a player to use. As a DM, Negative Energy Flood will be shit, because even if you reduce something to 0 hit points and you're like, aha, then you realize it's not technically killing them because player characters get death saving throws. You can also heal undead with it. You roll 5d12 on an undead and then they heal for half that amount. I guess that's cool flavor for a bad guy if you wanted to use them for that. But I've never found a reason to, because there's other ways to just do it better. Circle of Death. big old 60-foot radius blast of necrotic. It's a necrotic fireball that's bigger. 8d6, and it costs 500 gold. But then you can cast it once you've purchased the thing. Unlimited amount of times, I think this is pretty good overall. The damage is lacking, but it makes up for it with the absolutely gargantuan range, so that even if your party has spaced out immensely, you could still hit all of them. And a lot of things are not resistant to undead. Unless your party has Aasimar, then they're not fine. There's a very simple spell called Harm, 6th level, where if you target something within 60 feet, they need to make a Constitution saving throw or take 14d6 necrotic damage, or half as much on a successful save. That's really fucking good. The damage can't reduce their hit points below 1. However, what's really interesting is that if the target fails their saving throw, they can't regain the hit points they just lost, which is 14d6, which is almost double a fireball's amount of damage, which is crazy. Basically, that like hit point reduction lasts for an hour as well. Someone can, like, you know, get rid of that negative, but the hit points will stay down, which is neat. Only clerics get that, but you can go wild with it. Finger of Death. Big old Constitution saving throw to something within 60 feet of it as you kind of like pointed it. They need to make a con save, or they're taking 7d8 plus 30 necrotic damage. The damage, in my opinion, is not really as good as like Disintegrate being more reliable. Finger of Death and kind of like Disintegrate are on the same wavelength, but Disintegrate has the cost of, if the target succeeds the save, they take no damage, none. Finger of Death can be reliably dealing a buttload of damage. Again, if you, similar to Negative Energy Flood, if you kill something with it, they rise as a zombie. I think this was introduced in Elemental Evil, which is alright, I guess. It brought Genasi into the fold. Genasi are kind of cool. 30-foot cube, big old spell, Abby Dalzim's Horrid Wilting. All you need is a bit of sponge to cast it. Each creature in that area needs to make a con save, or they're taking 12d8. There's other rules sprinkled in there as well, like constructs undead, they can't be affected, and you kill plants again. It's alright, I guess. There's just things that do it better. Finally, I believe, I did not realize this was a spell. Time Ravage was added in, I think, Wild Mount for Chronologists and Graviturgists. You need it costs that 5,000 gold that you're never getting back to cast this spell. You target someone, they need to make a con save, or they're taking 10d12. Pretty decent. 9th level spell though, so wah wah wah. If they fail, they also age to the point where they only have 30 days left to live before they just die of old age. They basically get disadvantage on everything, and their walking speed is halved. Only Greater Restoration or literally Wish can end the effects and restore them to their previous age. That is the main thing that I like about this. You've got a big bad evil guy that's mortal, you just cast that on them, and if they fail the save, they are now gonna die in 30 days, and you can just be like, right, well, we've got no worries, and just hope that they don't have a cleric. I've learned a lot here. I hope you have as well. I just kind of ran through each one and told you what it does, and maybe a couple uses for it, because there's a lot, but I wanted to try and cover as many as I can. This was originally a recommendation from someone saying I talk about Circle of Death, and I'm like, that's cool and all. That's one spell. That will take a minute to talk about, if that. My Bane and Bless video where I talked about 2 spells that do like opposite things were like 3 minutes, and that's because I stretched it out. So here we are. There's some very interesting newer ones that have been added that I just learned about here. And some other interesting necromancy spells that I might want to talk about. While researching this, I read into Clone a little bit, and I was like, woo! Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We've probably by now started our, I think, maybe, it might be soon, Curse of Strahd stream. Make sure you check around for that in Discord. And stuff like that. Links are in the description and all that jazz. But yeah, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.